Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Monday, August 22nd, 2022 Maplewood City Council meeting. I don't know about my fellow council members, but something has changed in the air, and I think fall is coming. I was thinking about this today as I was driving around town. This is now, we're pushing towards the end of August. The Rice Larpenter Summer Block Party is now history. It was a huge success. I hope some of you, my fellow council members, got there too. It was a lot of fun. Let's see, the air feels a little bit different. We're past that really hot weather, and now we're kind of into the, you can feel kind of a little bit of crisp in the air, at least in the evenings. I know that our public safety department now is posting on Facebook the safety rules for driving with school buses on the road and stopping for school buses. Let's see, the state fair starts next week. Road projects, if you've been driving around town, the road projects are getting closer to being done. The final big city event, Celebrate Summer, is coming up. Let's see, it's August 31st, 2022, over at Edgerton Park. I'd invite everyone to come on over. It's going to be a lot of fun. It is from 6 to 7:30. It's a free event. There's going to be inflatables, activities, free hot dogs, chips, and water. Our public safety department is going to be there. Parks and Natural Resources is going to be there with a bunch of different activities. So it should be fun, and it's kind of the last big city event before we move into Labor Day. So, folks, we know fall is coming, and I actually thought I saw a couple of trees that looked like they were starting to go a little bit yellow. I hope it wasn't emerald ash borer, but we're taking care of that as well. But still, fall is coming, and I can just feel it. So, anyway, welcome everyone to our city council meeting. We have a busy night. We're going to be swearing in a new police officer tonight, which is always exciting. I know the council always looks forward to that, so that's going to be fun. And you have quite a support system with you over there, so it's going to be a fun event. So with that, everyone, let us rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome our Assistant City Manager, Mike Darrow, who is sitting at my right. He is replacing Melinda tonight, who is enjoying some well-needed time off. So, City Clerkson, do you want to start with our roll call?
Councilmember Juneman?
Here.
Councilmember Knutson?
Here.
Councilmember Villavicencio?
Here.
Councilmember Cave?
Here.
Mayor Abrams?
I'm here as well. Council members, let's move to approval of minutes. First, we have the August 8th, 2022 City Council workshop.
We haven't it on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, approval of the agenda.
I motion
Sorry.
approval.
Second.
Okay, they'll keep me moving. Yeah, it must be the weather. Okay.
It's that bite in the air, that's it.
It is. It's going to be a cool night, I heard. There's been a motion by Cave, seconded by Juneman, to approve the agenda. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Now we move on to the approval of the minutes. The August 8th, 2022 City Council Workshop meeting minutes.
I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Juneman, seconded by Cave, the motion to approve the August 8th, 2022 City Council Workshop meeting minutes. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Next, we have the August 8th, 2022 City Council meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Juneman, seconded by Villavicencio, the motion to approve the August 8th, 2022 City Council meeting minutes. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. One more, we have the August 12th, 2022 City Council special meeting minutes. Is there a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Juneman, seconded by Knutson, the motion to approve the August 12th, 2022 City Council special meeting minutes. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. We move on to appointments and presentations. We have our council calendar update, and Mr. Darrow, that is you.
Good evening, everybody. Just a couple updates. There is a special meeting next Monday that begins at 5 o'clock. It's a closed session to discuss the compensation study, and then we're going to open it up for a open meeting on the 2023 budget. And just a reminder that on September 12th, there'll be a workshop, an update on DEI initiatives, and then the council meeting, there'll be a adoption of the 2023 preliminary budgets. And those are the updates that I have, unless there's any questions or comments.
Hey, council, any questions or comments? Okay, then moving on, there were no council presentations, and we move on to the swearing-in ceremony for Officer James Quirk. Public Safety Director Beardeman, this is your agenda item. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Mayor. Just want to start by thanking you as well as the council and the city manager for your continued support. I know the police department and public safety definitely appreciate that. Also want to thank the officers. We had a larger group that was coming tonight. It's actually James's crew, but they got called out on some calls, so apparently that takes priority over this. So they're out on calls, but they can definitely watch it tonight later on and stream it live. So I also want to thank family members that have shown up tonight to show their support as well for the swearing in of our new Maplewood police officer. So at this time, I'd like to welcome James Quirk up to the podium. Mayor, Council, this is James Quirk, otherwise known as Badge 431. In January 2022, the Maplewood Police Department held a traditional hiring process. Out of that process, Officer James Quirk rose to the top. He was selected by the Maplewood Police Department to be the next Maplewood police officer. Officer Quirk, as of I think last week, successfully completed his field training, which is over 3 months of training. It is now certified for solo patrol as a Maplewood police officer. He's already made this his home, I believe. Feels like he's part of the family already, and so it's been a great transition and a great hire. It will come as no surprise that these are challenging times to be a police officer. While policing is an honorable profession, we have undergone profound change and scrutiny over the past decade, and especially within the last 5 years. Hundreds of police officers in Minnesota have left the job in the past 2 years. Despite these challenges, my commitment to this community is that we continue to recruit and hire the best, most professional, and community-centric officers. I am proud of our continued work to provide a safe and just community, and I'm inspired by officers such as James who continue to answer the call to become police officers despite this very challenging environment. James, in coming days, months, or years, at some point in time, you will stop and ask yourself, much like I did, maybe more than once, why did I sign up for this job? When you think about this question, I encourage you to reflect on 3 things. Number 1, you want a career in one of the world's greatest, most rewarding, and honorable professions. Number 2, you want to make a real difference in our community and in this profession. And number 3, probably the most important, our community and this profession need you. If not at any other time, policing needs you now. Today you received a personally signed letter from me. That letter outlined what my expectations are of you and of all officers of the Maplewood Police Department. The closing paragraph of that letter states the following: I trust that you will always conduct yourself in a manner that will validate the wisdom of the Maplewood Police Department having hired you, as opposed to the other unsuccessful candidates that wanted to wear this badge. Please don't ever forget the high standards and high expectations that we have of you as a member of the Maplewood Police Department. In closing, I want to make sure I communicate to you. Always serve our community and this profession with pride and honor. On behalf of the City of Maplewood, congratulations to James, his wife Kelly, and to his family, and be safe out there. At this time, Officer James Quirk will be sworn in as badge number 431. Stand there, please.
Raise your right hand. I, James Quirk, do solemnly swear
I, James Quirk, do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and of the state of Minnesota,
and of the state of Minnesota,
and faithfully discharge the duties
and faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of police officer
of the office of the police officer
in the city of Maplewood,
in the city of Maplewood,
in the county of Ramsey,
in the county of Ramsey,
and the state of Minnesota,
and the state of Minnesota,
to the best of my judgment and ability.
to the best of my judgment and ability.
I will never betray my badge or my integrity,
I will never betray my badge or integrity,
my character or the public trust.
my character or the public trust.
I will always have the courage
I will always have the courage
to hold myself
to hold myself
and others accountable for our
and
actions.
my others accountable for their actions.
Congratulations.
Well, I'm not much of a public speaker, but I'll do my best to keep everyone entertained for a little while. I'd first like to extend my thank you to Mayor Abrams and the entire City Council for this opportunity to be here tonight. I'd also like to thank our chief, deputy chief, and all the admin that are able to make it today and that we have here for this opportunity, the ability to be able to serve this great community. I'd also like to set forth a few goals of mine that I worked through when I first decided to get into this career. I'd first like to make a positive impact on the community that I'll be serving in Maplewood, and I feel like I've already done that in the short time that I've been here. I'd also like to say how much I enjoy getting out into the community. The Knights Unite was a fantastic opportunity to meet so many of the city council members and those people within the community. Another goal of mine is to do as much as I possibly can for the department that I chose to work for. I hope to take advantage of so many opportunities that we have here at Maplewood Police Department, a few of those including becoming a school resource officer or possibly a K-9 officer sometime down the road in my career. As the chief said, I really believe that I have made this my second home away from home, and I, again, cannot wait for the opportunity to continue to serve this great community. Lastly, I'd like to thank my family that showed up today, my parents, Pat and Karen, my sister, Tia, and of course, I don't see my other two brothers if they're in the area, of course, but I'd just like to thank them so much for everything that they've done throughout my life. Of course, I'd also like to thank my beautiful wife, Kelly, for being here tonight. We just got married last May, and she's always a great supporter of mine, even though there's a few times where I've come home at 4 in the morning and scared her a few times because she's sleeping. So she's always been my top supporter, and I can't wait to continue to work with her in this career of mine. Again, lastly, I'd just like to thank everyone here for being here tonight, friends, family, everyone within the police department. I cannot wait to continue to work through everyone in my career. Thank you so much.
You're good. This is simple. This is simple. Oh, wait, we'll get this over here. I was looking for Melinda. Where's Melinda? We both Thanks, Cal. Oh, thanks. All right, cheers. That'd be great. We're good.
Thank you. Everyone leaves to go enjoy some cake while we continue with our council meeting. Thank you, everyone.
I know.
Moving on our agenda, the next item is our strategic plan update for the second quarter 2022. We have Lois Knudsen presenting tonight. Welcome, Lois.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. My name is Lois Knudsen. I am the Administrative Services and Performance Measurement Coordinator for the city. So part of my job is overseeing our strategic plan, making sure we're on track, and reporting to the council on our progress every quarter. As you can see, we are at 49% progress on the plan. Just a reminder that the way this is tracked in Invisio is this progress dial is driven by the progress made on the action initiatives, which are the lowest level of the plan. Some of our performance measures do not have action initiatives, so it's a rough estimate of where we are on the plan. So for halfway through the year, 49% progress is pretty good. Also keep in mind that some measures are annual measures that we track every year, and there are others that are ongoing, so we won't finish them for 2, 3 to 5 years, something like that. There is currently 7.3% disruption with our plan. 2 of the measures have major disruptions. One of those has been on here a couple times. The fire department had an initiative to conduct home safety visits at 25% of manufactured home communities. It was at first it was delayed because of COVID, and now when things are ramping back up, they moved into the new fire station, so that has taken all of their energy, so hopefully we'll get on track with that soon. The other major disruption involves the Purple Line and the project design of that. So we are kind of waiting for Metro Transit to finalize those plans because that does impact the Gladstone neighborhood and the development that is happening there. There are a few minor disruptions. One is related to tracking and ensuring we're responding to commercial and residential permit applications and plan reviews in a timely fashion. And that was they're figuring out a method to track that, and it was kind of delayed because of other issues with the Acela implementation. It seems like we say the word Acela a lot around here, but we're getting the bugs figured out, I think. The other minor disruption, the police department has yet to hire a crime analyst, and I think that position is just kind of on hold for now. And then as part of the rental licensing program, we are requiring crime-free training for property managers, and that still has not happened yet. Under community inclusiveness, we've had several community outreach events recently, National Night Out, some Celebrate Summer events, the July 4th fireworks, and at a lot of those events, city staff were there volunteering and helping run the event. And then upcoming in October, we have the Boo Bash. And as Mayor Abrams mentioned earlier, next week is the last Celebrate Summer event. Our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives are going quite well. We've completed these staff training for all of the staff. We have a upcoming SMT More team meeting, and that will be with our representatives, I believe, from the consultants on the DEI efforts. And we will be discussing an equity action plan as well as looking over this whole community inclusiveness part of the strategic plan. We'll be reevaluating the performance measures there with their assistance. And then we are working to ensure city services and facilities are accessible to our diverse community. And that, again, will be discussed at that meeting with the SMT and the MORE team. Environmental stewardship, this is our newest priority that we added this year. Lots happening on the City Hall campus. Pollinator turf conversion. This says preparation for goats because when the reporting was done at the end of June, the goats weren't here yet. But as many of you know, the goats were here on campus. I believe there were about 60 goats, and they were put into 3 different areas around campus, and they ate all the buckthorn. Now, then they were taken away for 30 days to go back to the ranch and clean out their systems, I guess, and then they will be coming back shortly after Labor Day and be put through those same 3 areas and to eat up the rest of anything that came back. They are working hard on scheduling bow hunts for the Priory, Carver, and Spoon Lake preserves. We've had several inquiries from neighbors in regard to the bow hunts. People are like, the deer are out of control, you really need to take care of this. So it is something that happens annually. There have been 140 ash trees removed and 47 replacement trees were planted. The city achieved the Green Step Cities Level 5 award for the 6th time. And this is a good segue into our new display case, which is back in the corner. You can't see it, it's behind that pillar, but on your way out or when you have a break, go take a look at it because that award is in there among with other awards the city has received. Financial and asset management. During the recent bond issuance, which took place in June, the S&P upheld the city's AA+ rating and the very strong management rating. We are working to develop a facilities maintenance plan. A lot of our assets are buildings that we own, and we just have decided we need to develop a plan for the repair and replacement of things within the buildings. There were 3 street improvement projects this summer that are currently under construction with anticipated completion of all of them by November. The total mileage of those projects is 4.57 miles. So that will, again, help us to increase the street rating, the pavement index on the streets that are within the city. We're also working to develop a new snow and ice policy. A lot of the recent street projects have included trails and or sidewalks. So there are more things for our staff to deal with when the snow and ice comes. So we're just revising that plan so it can be more efficient and effective. Integrated communication. There have been a lot of social media stories lately promoting and highlighting events that have happened recently in the city, such as the spring cleanup, Earth Week, the Easter egg hunt, the fire station opening, and even the 4th of July fireworks was live on Facebook Live. The communication team has been instrumental in the hiring efforts of the city. They have done a lot with helping us with postings as well as the creation of some videos. There's one, Why Maplewood, that they did a really nice job on, and then a recent one for the finance director position. We're working on coordination of a marketing plan with the new commercial developments that are happening in the city. We'd like to kind of tie the city into them when they market them so that there can be some awareness of this is Maplewood, this is happening in Maplewood. Operational effectiveness. We recently learned that the workers' compensation mod factor is at 1.13. Our goal is to be at 1 or below, but this is actually really good news because in 2020 we were at 1.66. 2021 went down to 1.38, and now we are down to 1.13. So we're making progress in the right direction. The code enforcement complaint process has been updated and everything is now automated. So it's easier to track the complaints and it's also easier to track the follow-up to see what's happening on them. Fire and EMS emergency response time performance is actually down, which is not good. We want it to get back up to where the goal is. But there was an 11% call volume increase from 2020 to 2021. But now that the North Station is occupied, hopefully that should result in some improvement in that area as well. But we'll just have to, it'll probably take a few quarters to get those things figured out. Targeted redevelopment. There were recently 2 purchase agreements to sell city-owned property in the Gladstone area. One is Reuter Walton on the Maplewood Marine site, and the other is the Beacon Interface Housing on the Gladstone House site. Rental housing program is up and doing well. We have a new rental housing inspector hired. His name is Matt Young. And we are on track to inspect all buildings by the end of 2022. What's ahead? As I mentioned before, we're having a meeting with the SMT and the MORE team, and we're going to reevaluate the community inclusiveness performance measures. I've been working personally with Invisio on improvement of the reports. There's a few things little glitchy things that have been problems. So we've had a lot of conversations, and we are making progress on that as well. At the fall retreat, we hope to establish a mission statement and values as part of the strategic plan. And then I'm looking to apply for the ICMA Certificates in Performance Measurement for 2022. I keep checking the website, and the latest is applications will open in August, but it has said that all month, so we'll see where that goes. I'm keeping my eye on it so we can get that submitted as well. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you. I see Councilmember Juniman has a question or a comment.
A comment, actually. Thank you, Lois. We've been doing this enough now, and you've been explaining it over and over. We're actually starting to get it when you explain it. Two comments, one on the green team and what they're doing with Step 5 Green Step Cities. There are significant changes you have to make every year, and now it's into measuring metrics like reducing your greenhouse gases, assessing your fleet. They're complicated items, and so the fact that we can keep moving ahead says a lot about our staff being willing to help us with this. It's a big time commitment. And about the fire EMS response time and the call increase, during that same period of time, because of COVID, they were experiencing a very big staff shortage at the Ramsey County Communications Center. And so that had something to do with some of the calls being stalled a couple of seconds anyway. There just weren't as many people to fill the slots. And so that affected it partially as well. It wasn't just us. So, and you know, circumstance is what it is. You can't create people. And they are working really hard going to schools and having job fairs. It's not a job that attracts as many people anymore like others. After the pandemic, high-stress jobs are not attracting people. So it's a difficult thing. But I just wanted people to know that that was actually a combination factor. It wasn't just us. It was the fact that they were doing their best and they kept up, but it was not the usual performance. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Knudsen.
Thank you. I just a question on the workers' comp mod factor. We're shooting for 1.0. Given other cities of similar size, what's kind of the right number? I mean, I'm thinking of all the dangerous things we do, especially in Steve's department, that 1.13 isn't too bad, although we like it 0, but nevertheless.
Ellie, do you have info on that?
Finance Director Paul Sett.
Mayor Abrams and Council, yes, 1 is really ideal. Less than 1 is even better than ideal. But that means that we've kind of reached the average. We've reached the, kind of the status quo. Anything over 1 is we have more accidents than we're paying in premiums, and so they have to raise our premiums. So anything 1 or below is desirable. We have had, I think, as low as 0.89 at one time. So hopefully we'll get back there again. It goes in cycles.
Thank you.
Councilmember Cave.
Hi, thank you, Lois. Great report.
Thank you.
Just one question. I know we had talked about the community sending out, like we did before. Yeah, the survey. Is that?
That is on schedule for the end of the year.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that drives the whole rest of the plan. Because what are people worried about? What are they concerned about? What do they think we're doing a good job on, and what do they think we need to get better on? So
this is something maybe citizens of Maplewood can be aware of, that they're going to be getting possibly a chance to contribute to this.
And usually what we do is there's a mailing that goes to random people, but then there's also a place that we post where anybody who wants to can come on and complete the survey.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a couple of things, Lois. In terms of environmental stewardship, I don't remember seeing under environmental stewardship, maybe I missed it. I read it pretty carefully. Our tree sale. We don't have anything about the tree sale that we do, and it seems to me that that should be included because that is a huge hit every spring. I think we've done it now 4 years in a
Yep,
row.
at least that.
And the trees sell out so quickly that, I mean, that's environmental stewardship right there, so maybe we want to add that.
That's a very good idea. What I tend to do is meet with the different departments, so I will bring that to Parks and Natural Resources
Okay.
radar, and we'll figure out where it would fit.
Great. And maybe this comment is for Mr. Darrow, but in terms of the rental housing program, Lois, indicated that we will be wrapping up, let's on track to inspect all rental housing by the end of 2022. I think that it would be a really great idea, and I'll ask my fellow council members what they think as well, but to have a wrap-up report because, yeah, included in one of our workshops on what did we find. You know, we have two council members who weren't on the council at that time when we adopted the rental housing ordinance because we were learning that we had unsafe properties in our community. And so we went with this rental housing ordinance, and I think it would be very helpful for us to know how has it worked. Of course, we had delays because of COVID. People weren't going into homes and inspecting, but now that we will have inspected all buildings, what did we find? And are we getting those problems addressed? Is there anything that we as a council need to do maybe to tweak that ordinance to make it more efficient and effective so that we can ensure that all of our rental properties are safe and, good places to live in our community? So I would ask that, council members, I see some shaking heads, so that we would get a report at the end of the year during a workshop. Mr. Darrow?
I will coordinate with Melinda, and we'll make sure that that gets done by the end of the year.
Great, thank you. And also, one last time, and this is really for anyone who happens to be watching, because many times the council uses this term about our staff volunteering. And I've actually gotten questions about this out in the community. Do you make your staff volunteer? You know, they're paid. It is compensated time. But we have a philosophy here at Maplewood, and staff can weigh in, either Lois or Mr. Darrow, that staff who actually participate in our community know our community and are engaged then in our community, and it helps to improve staff performance and service in our community if we all work together like that. And so what they do, and correct me if I'm wrong on this as well, that staff get input as to how they would like to volunteer, but it's actually paid time. We're not making anyone work for free. They can decide if they like National Night Out, they can come and help at National Night Out. If they want to do, something else, we have some staff that volunteer and do Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and Meals on Wheels, and all engaged in our community, because then staff knows our community and they are engaged in our community. So it's not volunteer time, but we call it that.
Yeah, I every time I write that, I struggle with how I'm saying it. It's like, well, what should we be saying? But
It's
staff are engaging.
But then that sounds
Right, I
so
know.
cliche. It's
It's like
really
what-
that they get
yeah.
to pick,
Right.
but they're engaging in our community. And I think it's a wonderful expectation
Yes.
that if you work here, you need to be involved in the community. So, yeah, but it's not volunteering. They're not
Right.
doing it for free. So, thank you, Lois, for an excellent presentation.
Thank
We
you, Mayor and
appreciate it.
Council.
Council, moving on to our consent agenda, we have 9 items. Is there a motion?
I move approval of consent agenda items G1 through 9.
Second.
Moved by Juniman, seconded by Cave. Consent agenda items G1 through 9. Is there any further discussion?
Mayor, I'd like to ask a question on number 8.
Okay, then let's highlight number 8. We'll do that now. The agreement with Tyler Technologies for finance software. Mr. Folds, I see you sitting out there. This question is going to be for you.
He's already pointing to Ellen. Yeah.
Do you want to maybe come up to the DS? Councilmember Knutson, your question, please.
As I thoroughly enjoyed reading every page of this, no, I did. I've done these SAS agreements in the past, and I found something interesting under Section G. It says indemnification and limitation of liability and insurance. And it kind of suggests that they would indemnify us if they got sued or under pressure for infringement, not us. How does that work?
Mayor and Council, I will defer to City Attorney Beatty. I believe he read through that. I am not a legal expert by any means.
Mr. Beatty, it's on page 159 of 229.
Madam Mayor, Council, I don't have it in front of me.
Madam Mayor, would you like me to read it?
Finance Director Paulseth, yes.
The section states that we, meaning Tyler, will indemnify and hold harmless you and your agents, officials, and employees from and against any and all third-party claims, losses, liabilities, damages, costs, and expenses, including reasonable attorney's fees and costs for personal injury or property damage to the extent caused by our negligence or willful misconduct, or our violation of PCI DSS requirements, or a law applicable to our performance under this agreement. You must notify us promptly in writing of the claim and give us sole control over its defense or settlement. You agree to provide us with reasonable assistance, cooperation, and information in defending the claim at our expense.
Mr. Beatty.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, Council, that simply means if they do something wrong and we are included in any kind of lawsuit, they will defend us in that litigation.
My follow-up question is, what happens to the service we need or want during something like this with Tyler? Say, Tyler does have an intellectual property infringement complaint. What happens to our need for that software?
Mayor and Council, that's a good question. You can follow up with them if you would like. I think typically there's another component of it that if there was any risk to the city with malware or something, that they would segment off the version of that application at that time where the complaint or the risk was, I guess, notified or shown to be present. And then they'd spin up a mirror site.
Okay.
So technically, you could basically mark that as read-only while spinning up a mirror site that we could continue to use. I would think that would be present.
One other quick question. Of this agreement, is there any development of new software in this?
Mayor and Council, not development so much as it is just specific for our use, but there's continued improvements that are, I think, if it's similar to our existing Tyler, voted on by active clients, and so you can vote certain things up the development chain.
Thank you.
Councilmember Juniman.
Yeah, I think we should, again, highlight number 4, just to remind people that a week from tonight, we're having a special meeting.
Okay. Do you want any further comments on that? Do you
Well,
want
just
Mr.
to
Dare?
remind, so everyone's aware, we're having a special workshop next Monday, starting at 5 p.m. First, we'll have a closed session to go over the compensation study, and then an open session on the 2023 budget.
Okay. So I think we have addressed the highlighted sections. Okay, let's go to a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. We have no unfinished business. We have.
Mayor, I don't know if we need to, but there was no motion on to accept the strategic plan report for the second quarter.
Thank you. Let's look back. I think Lois has already left.
Wouldn't you?
Hold on.
Information.
Have any other questions?
You know, it's for, oh, I'm sorry.
It's on the It's on the
Motion to
intro.
accept the strategic plan, yeah, okay.
Okay.
So, let's go back. Is there a motion to accept the strategic plan report for the second quarter?
So moved. Motion to accept the strategic plan report for the second quarter of 2022.
Second.
Moved by Villavicencio, seconded by Cave, the motion to accept the strategic plan report for the second quarter of 2022. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you for catching that. And now we go forward to the conditional use permit resolution for neurorestorative, 822 McKnight Road. Mr. Thompson, the way that we're going to do this tonight, Mr. Thompson, our Community Development Director, is going to make the staff report, and then I will encourage or invite the council to ask any questions of Mr. Thompson. And then I believe we have someone from Neurorestorative here. They will have an opportunity to present to the council, and then we'll ask questions of that representative. And then I have also, I know council members, we have received a number of emails from residents close to 822 McKnight, and I have indicated that we would take testimony from them. So it won't be a formal public hearing, but you'll have an opportunity. Anyone who wants to speak to this issue can come up to the dais and introduce themselves with their name and their address, and then you'll have 3 minutes. And when you're done speaking, we need to get your name, and if you would just go over to City Clerk Sint, and she has a sign-in sheet so that we can get your name spelled correctly and indicate that you were here. And then the council will consider, and then I believe that there's one motion before us, but we will have a discussion about that, and then we'll do whatever we're going to do with that. So that's kind of a framework on how we're going to manage it. So, Mr. Thompson, let's start with you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I just want to go through some of the history and the proposal that's before the Council tonight related to this property. Neurorestorative, they do have representatives here tonight that can provide more information, but they are a residential care and rehabilitation provider. They are the applicant. They do not currently own the property, is my understanding, but they have a purchase agreement to purchase the property. And then there's really two components to the project. First is the construction of the home that would serve as the facility for the location. And the second is related to the use of the property as a residential care facility. So I think it's important to note, just for the community and for the council, that there's actually a state statute that says that residential care facilities that are licensed by the state that serve 6 or fewer people are permitted use within every single family zoning district. And so if a facility has 6 or fewer, if they're licensed for 6 or fewer people, they are a permitted use, which doesn't require any sort of use approval from the city and from the council. But the applicant is requesting 8 residents at this facility. So really the review here is the net increase from 6 to 8, so the 2 additional residents that would occupy the site. I do want to give a little bit of background on the property. It's zoned R1. It's guided in our comp plan for low-density residential, and then it's zoned R1. So that's a single-family residential zoning district. It has that zoning district has a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet. And as I said, our code requires that conditional use permit beyond that 6 people. So at 8, that's what requires the conditional use permit. To give you a little bit of history, the property directly fronts on McKnight. It's currently vacant. There was previously a home on the property. And it was actually the site, it's hard to see on here, but this property and the property to the north were initially one parcel, and it was subdivided through a lot division application back in 2017. So it was subdivided in 2017. It is a buildable lot of record, zoned as R1, and so there is buildable area on the lot, and so it certainly allows for the construction of permitted uses under the zoning code, and then also for the facility if approved as a conditional use permit. This is the plan from the 2017 lot division, just to show you what occurred back in 2017. As part of that, it was an administrative approval, just given the number of lots. But there's a wetland, I'll show it in a future slide. There's a regulated wetland on the far south end of the property, kind of the southwest corner along McKnight Road. And given the buffer and setback requirements we have, we did ask, as part of that lot division, to show a future house pad. It was not a house design. It was just kind of a conceptual plan showing how a house could be constructed on the lot to comply with all of the setback requirements and meet the zoning requirements. I think it's important to note that there was a previous home that was located further up on the property and was within the wetland buffer. And I will say that the driveway that was on the lot was very informal. It wasn't paved. It was really, if you can actually go on Google Street View and see it today, it was really just kind of tire tracks. So there's never a paved driveway on the property. I think it's important to note that given that 75, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but given the 75-foot setback requirement we have, there is no way to build a driveway on this property and not be within that 75 feet of the wetland buffer. And so it was acknowledged with the lot division and allowing a buildable lot that ultimately there would need to be a driveway constructed within that wetland buffer and the wetland setback to serve a future structure on this lot. So this is the wetland on the property. So the subject property is kind of highlighted in that yellow color. Again, it's very large. It's 1.1 acre, almost 1.2 acres. So well exceeds our minimum lot size for that zoning district. And then the area in red it's not exact science. This is just done from a national wetland inventory, but the general location of where that wetland is located. You can see there's a significant portion located on the property to the south, and then there's the tail that comes up onto the property. In our wetland ordinance, we have an average buffer requirement of 100 feet with no less than 75 feet. So that's what our ordinance requires in terms of maintaining a buffer. That's not the wetland itself. So as we talk about the driveway and the subject property, there's no proposed impacts to the delineated edge of the wetland. The area they're talking about is within that required buffer, or kind of the native planting areas that allow for greater separation of impervious surfaces, structures, as well as additional infiltration areas. So I've said it, but they're requesting the increase from 6 to 8 residents as part of the conditional use permit. That's really the action before the council in the resolution is the conditional use permit related to the increase in use. I won't go into details about their operation because the applicant's here to talk about their business and their facility and how they operate it, but just know that it's a neurologic rehabilitation facility. I think it sounds pretty much exclusively all the patients that they take care of are accident. They have injuries from accidents that need rehabilitation in an intensive and residential facility setting. They have, because it's intertwined, the facility is intertwined, the size of it is intertwined with the construction of the building. They did give us some site plans, building elevations, and floor plans just for us to provide additional information about the proposed use. So this is the initial site plan that was submitted. I'll talk about this first. And this shows the construction, I don't have a great highlighter, of the residential care facility. I would say the structure is pushed far back on the lot, probably more so than you would in a normal situation, largely because of that wetland. And in order to comply with that 100-foot buffer requirement averaging, it's easiest to comply with that by pushing the structure beyond that 100-foot line. So that's pushing the structure further back onto the lot. We certainly know that the lot's big, and that's all, any of that area outside of that 100 feet is all buildable area, so it complies with setbacks and whatnot. We do know there's some slopes on the back of the lot. The lot then goes up and has an increase in topography at the back of the house. This is the site plan that was initially reviewed by the Planning Commission. They did provide some preliminary building elevations. You can see it's very residential in design. They can talk about their model being around a residential setting for their care. Has appearances of a single-family home and residential in nature. They also did submit a floor plan. I know there was some discussion at the Planning Commission about the size of the structure. So it's just given the nature of the care, it is a single-story structure. So there's no facilities on a second floor or basement. And so all of those, and then their care is centered around 8 separate bedrooms. So there's no kind of dual occupancy rooms or shared rooms. So There are 8 bedrooms within the facility. I think they also talked to the Planning Commission about fully ADA accessible, just given the needs of the people living here. And so it does drive some of just the sizes of rooms, sizes of bathrooms. But the total structure size, I mean, approximately is around 3,800 square feet of non-garage space on that main floor. And then as you can see, there'd be an attached 3-car garage along the front of the house. Planning Commission reviewed this back on July 19th. There was, and they held the public hearing on it. There was a number of residents and neighbors that attended and spoke at the public hearing. I know that was included in your packet in terms of the feedback that was received. To summarize it, I think we heard concerns about parking, and just given the number of employees and visitors, how can parking be accommodated on the site? Second, just whether it was an appropriate use, just whether that increase in number of residents was appropriate on the site and given the neighborhood context. And then third, I know there's a lot of conversations about the wetland and drainage and some of the water quality impacts on the property. Ultimately, the Planning Commission, who makes an advisory recommendation to you, recommended approval of the conditional use permit, and they added 2 conditions that were specifically related to parking. One, that the conditional use permit include a condition that no parking can happen on McKnight to ensure that that's not happening. And then after discussion, the Planning Commission asked that they submit a parking plan for the review by staff before this came to you. So I know initially we talked about this coming to your last council meeting, but we needed some time to work with that applicant on that parking plan. With those 2 changes and to the recommendations, as I said, the Planning Commission recommended approval. So this is, this is the parking information that's submitted by the applicant, or the parking plan. I will tell you, we have some competing priorities in trying to accomplish the plan. This is not the only version of the plan that we worked through. One, I think that area of the property, so that driveway, because the house is at the 100-foot setback, that entire driveway is located within the wetland buffer. So we're trying to minimize the impacts of that wetland buffer with the size of the driveway, given that it's still a long driveway and there's still a demand for parking. The second is still ensuring that it's residential in nature, and is not building like a commercial parking lot out there. So we wanted to avoid like a full-blown standard striped 20-foot by 10-foot parking stalls in a formal parking. So this was the plan we came up with. The applicant has stated that based on their other facilities throughout the country, they see 5 to 7 vehicles of being just the average need. That's based on the number of employees that are there during peak shift, the vehicle that they have. I think they have a van for the facility itself, as well as I think they kind of added one visitor stall for a visitor at that peak time. I think the Planning Commission, and based on some of the neighborhood feedback that we heard, the Planning Commission thought there was just shift change and additional visitors at peak times. They thought there was a need for more than 7. And so this plan shows how 8 cars can be parked on the site, and still allow for turning movements in and out of the site, so that you don't have to do can I use your keys and move your car and back out of the lot. So it's again hard to show here, but that's the reason for what we call kind of the hammerhead along the north property line, is to allow kind of the 90-degree backing maneuver. It's a very standard kind of or very standard residential design to allow for turning movements. So I would say this is, worst case scenario, peak time, maximum parking that the applicant anticipates would be constructed on the lot. And we believe, after our review, is addressing the Planning Commission condition and the concern they had about providing a parking plan. I think this is, yes. And then in that location, it does comply with the impervious surface maximums that we have within the front yard, and the zoning and wetland requirements. The second piece, let me go back. My slides must be out of order here. The second piece that I know, again, was brought up as part of the neighborhood concern is the stormwater and kind of drainage to that wetland. And so given the driveway is getting a little bit larger because of the additional parking that's wanted, and the wetland proximity and the driveway largely being located within the wetland, in working with our Public Works and Engineering staff, we've added an additional condition that was not talked about at the Planning Commission specifically, but that requires kind of above and beyond stormwater management and water quality techniques that the applicant provide that as part of this request. So that is included, that they provide some water quality and infiltration treatment for that additional impervious surface and kind of work the site grading to address the additional runoff that would occur from some of the larger components of the site improvements. Again, I just want to emphasize that this is above and beyond. It's not something our typical stormwater management rule would require, but it's something that as part of the conditional use permit we certainly think is reasonable and kind of has a nexus to the proposed application. So with that, so we believe that's satisfied what the Planning Commission asked for in addition to the stormwater management. So with that, we have included in your packet tonight a resolution which would approve the conditional use permit for the increase in number of residents from 6 to 8, so for a total of 8 residents on the property. And we have noted in those conditions that the facility ultimately has to come in for a building permit and ensure that the setbacks are complied with, they're meeting all of our zoning ordinance. Our preliminary review says they are, but there will be, with the final design, a final review done to ensure that the facility is complying with all of our ordinance requirements. The second piece I just want to note, and this is separate from us, is that this is a state licensed facility. So the city does not license these types of facilities. They're licensed by the state, and they will be required to get that license. That has a lot to do with staff and ratios and qualifications and care that's provided there. We will certainly require that they give us a copy of their license so we know that they're licensed, but that's ultimately between them and the state and their licensing board requirements. So with that, Mayor and Council, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Any questions for Mr. Thompson? Okay, then would the representative from, I'm sorry, Councilmember Knudsen.
Yeah, Mr. Thompson, was there ever any discussion, given that driveway size, I mean, that's probably the biggest impact, because a 3,200 square foot roof isn't that big, given the total property. So, I mean, generally speaking, you're talking about driveway. Was there any discussion about impervious, features for the driveway?
Mayor and Council, doing like pervious?
Impervious, yeah.
Pervious,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, for the driveway surface?
Yeah.
We didn't specifically talk about that. No, we didn't get into the material stuff for it, but that's certainly an opportunity
Yeah,
to
I just think,
explore.
I mean, the driveway is kind of the big deal here, it seems like in parking, when you look at it, so. Thank you.
Councilmember Juniman.
What he said.
Which one, pervious or impervious?
Yeah.
It's pervious.
Pervious. Pervious.
Yeah. I think the lot split information said clearly that the driveway had to be what it was, and if you were going to expand it, then you would have to be asking for a variance on the wetland setback. So if in fact we do this, that has to become part of what we would need an motion for that. And it just looks like a lot of coverage of the lot, and I understand, but if this was in a lot that was totally away from the wetland and the buffer zone, I would have less concern than I do now. And I understand that the parking needs to be off the street, and I think this is a way of handling it, but I have a couple questions about that layout of parking. Say you have a day when there are 10 cars for some reason. So is there room for an emergency vehicle to go between those 2 lanes of parked cars on the driveway and turn around?
Mr. Thompson.
Mayor and Council, we did send this revised plan to our fire marshal, who reviewed it and commented back that they were comfortable with the access being provided for emergency vehicles.
Okay. Then I'm going to add the next question, which may gum up the works a little. In this climate, we have things called snowstorms. And sometimes they're what we used to call normal, and sometimes they're really not normal at all. And so you could end up with 18 inches. So in this scheme, and the fact that there is staff going in and out 24 hours a day, how do we know, or how do they know how they're going to do snow removal that precludes parking on the street or parking on the grass. No! Since this is all in the wetland buffer, you can't even have one tire on the grass. All the parking must be on the surface, improved surface. So,
Or pushing the snow into the wetland.
No, can do.
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I would defer the question on how they do the maintenance to the applicant, because they're certainly more familiar with that. I will tell you, we've certainly looked at areas for snow storage, and we do believe that, just given that there's land adjacent to the driveway, that there's room to move the snow off the driveway to ensure that the full surface of the driveway is.
But you're within the buffer for the entire driveway and next to it. So you can't pile the snow that has salt and stuff from the street right next to the driveway. That's the problem. I mean,
think
that's
what
an
we'll
issue.
do is we'll make sure that we ask that question
All
of the
right, but
representative
that's
when
kind
they
of where
come up.
the issue comes for me, is because it's not just the surface of the driveway, it's all in the buffer zone, so you can't pile anything on that, because we can't. So God knows we're not going to let residents do that.
We'll make sure that we ask the engineer that question. Councilmember Cave, do you have a question as well?
Just kind of a comment while we're starting here and after listening to Jeff. I just want you to know that I think the parking issue is like the biggest one for me here. That area, they say no parking on McKnight. I could see it happening. This piece of land is probably not the most ideal piece of land for this. The job you're doing with TBI is fantastic, phenomenal. Hands down, that's fabulous. But I think this piece of land that we're dealing with, we have other pieces of land in Maplewood, and I think this one is just probably not the best fit for the size of driveway and everything that is going to be needed. So those are just my thoughts right now.
Thank you, Councilmember Cave. And I'll just weigh in here, too. I concur with the questions being raised by my fellow council members. I actually was down at the property taking a look at it last week, and I have to describe it at best. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful, but it would be very challenging. Parking is a big issue for me. Protecting the wetlands absolutely is a big issue. And also, the idea, and it's actually included in our staff report, due to the large change in elevation from the rear of the property to the front, extra care will be needed in designing and grading the site, which means that you can't grade in the buffer. And so just the physical aspect of that, I think it makes this, I view this property as being very challenging for this kind of property. I agree with you. I think that the work is absolutely, it's a wonderful, would be a wonderful asset to our community. Mm-hmm. TBIs are a serious, serious problem, and having a facility like this is absolutely necessary. But as a council, we're looking at a piece of property, from the parking, the water, and one thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to create a problem where there's no other way other than parking out on the street, or we create problems with the wetland, or we create water problems for the other neighbors that are in that neighborhood, and that is a real big problem. It's an absolutely beautiful lot, but in my mind, it's a very challenging lot to try to get this much on that property kind of squeezed in. So those are some initial thoughts. I want to make sure that we get the engineer up and then the residents up as well. Councilmember Juniman, did you have one more thing before we
thank you, Mayor.
Get the engineer up?
When I went back to the paperwork from 2017 for the lot split, it specifically says 2 average size homes, 2 average size lots. And so that leads you to think, maybe this, as you said, maybe this is just too much for this lot. And when the split was made, even making a comment about the driveway indicates that there were issues no matter what you put on it. Mm-hmm. because of the wetland. And the parking issue is more because of what this particular project wants to do. But we wouldn't let, let's put it this way, we wouldn't let somebody move in and run a rooming house either, so that they had to park on the street. I mean, we just don't encourage that. So but I do think the biggest challenge is the whole wetland issue, and I, for one, will not. I'm sure you'd all faint if I would, but I won't. I would never say that our ordinance for this should be monkeyed with, never. And it protects too many things, including the neighbors, because there's a lot of water down there.
There is a whole lot of water. So let's bring the representative from Neuro Restorative up. If you want to come and join us, please. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. We think you have an admirable mission.
Thank you, ma'am.
In terms of the services that you supply. It's very necessary and important.
I appreciate the comment. We subscribe to that wholeheartedly. My name is Steve Miller. My address is 8 Longshot Drive in Troy, Illinois, spelled Longshot, for those who need to know how to spell it. I am the National Facilities Operations Director for Neuro Restorative, and I want to thank you this evening for the invitation to meet with you here, and we welcome the opportunity to meet with you, Madam Mayor, and members of the Maplewood City Council and citizens of the community. We are here to further discuss our conditional use application and plans to develop a community-based residence for people with neurological disruptions in their life. This environment is for citizens of Minnesota who seek residential care and assistance as they rehabilitate after a debilitating neurological disruption in their own lives and indeed in their own family and homes. A lot of times a neurological disruption, whether it's a stroke or a traumatic brain injury, that's a part of the business that we do, but we also serve people who have spinal cord injuries, anything that has to do with the central nervous system and disrupts their lives. I use the expression frequently, it's 10 bad seconds in an otherwise pretty good day. And the things that happen to people, in general terms, with automobile accidents, even Superman got thrown off a horse. So we are all familiar with what can happen and who it can happen to, and it's any one of us that potentially have this sort of a disruption in our lives. And so the point of community-based housing and residential rehabilitation is what happens to people once they come out of a hospital, once they have had surgery and repaired whatever damage, what happens to them then, and where do they go from there? Oftentimes they may be in the hospital for 42 days or so, and once they're done with them in the hospital and they've done all they can do, the natural inclination is to send people home. Oftentimes their homes are not set up for them at all. They're not developed for them. So somebody that's had a stroke is now in a wheelchair and figuring out how to, while they're in that recovery mode, rehabilitation mode, how do you get from your bedroom down the hall, make a right, go into the bathroom that's not set up for you? How do you relearn how to live your life with this disruption in your life? And so we develop these residential rehabilitation settings, community-based housing, so that people are not institutionalized and not put inappropriately in nursing homes where they don't receive the treatment that could cause them to thrive and prosper, but be able to go into a place that is very much like their home, community-based, where they have the opportunity to relearn learn as much of the life skills that they lost and have an opportunity to rehabilitate from there and be able to achieve their own personal goals. And that's part of our goal, is to help people set and achieve their own personal goals, to recover lost functions and life skills, and to get back to the most independent living capacity that they possibly can. Oftentimes people have lost some or much of their neurological function or skill sets due to a car accident or A big percentage of the people that we serve are construction workers that have fallen off roofs, fallen off of ladders, fallen off of trucks, got injured in industrial accidents. It's our neighbors. It's the people all around us who go to work every day and have had an accident. And when they come out of the hospital, they may not be ready to be at home. There may not be anybody that's a caregiver at home, or may not have the assistance and the caregivers that are capable of helping them to move forward. People and helping people who've lost the ability to help themselves is our mission, and it's our passion as a company. It's very important to me personally. I have a grandson that has Duchenne's muscular dystrophy and has been in a wheelchair for most of his life. And this is personal for me, in knowing how to help people find appropriate settings for their life. So we're here to welcome your questions and comments from the board concerning this proposal and request. I also have with me Sharon Berlin, who was with us at the Planning Commission, and she is more of an expert in the operations side of things. And Joe Maurer is here. He is a civil engineer who has worked with some of the city engineering folks and has helped to develop the various iterations of the site plan that Mr. Thompson has spoken to this evening.
I think it would be, thank you for your presentation. Any questions for this representative from Neuro Restorative?
Yes.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
I had mine.
Oh, I'm sorry. First it was
Yeah.
Councilmember Knudsen and then Councilmember Villavicencio.
Thank you. I'm a city council liaison to the planning commission, so I was there and listened to one of the things that struck me in your presentation at the planning commission is you described the average model throughout your organization is around 4. So I'm wondering how many of your facilities serve 8 people?
The model of 4, this is all dependent on states and what states allow. The state of Kentucky will only allow 3 persons under a roof line. The state of Maryland allows 4. The state of Massachusetts, 4, and they're moving towards 5. But many of the states are 6 to 8 and more.
Okay. How many of your facilities are 8?
By number, we have hundreds of facilities. How many are 8?
What's the percentage, let's say?
I would say it's probably 10%.
10%. Okay. So your functional model throughout your organization can adapt to programs less than 8. So what I'm getting at is, I mean, you're talking about stretching this property, essentially parking. So my other question is during the discussion we talked about staff overlap, and your chart basically has each shift with people on it. And so when pressured about overlap, in other words, if you've got 4 staff on, you're going to need 8 parking spots in order to consider the overlap. You suggested that there's a variable way of staffing. I need to know more about that. So in other words, people would have staggered shifts to avoid the overlap? Is that what you're planning?
Yes. And I probably would allow Ms. Berlin to speak to that more efficiently than I would, because she does manage these types of homes. But yes, the necessity is a mother of invention, and determining how you staff and how many people actually drive. One of the things that we did like about this property is the public transportation that's available. A lot of times our staff prefers public transportation, and there's a bus stop each direction in front of this property. So the staffing can be arranged to where we may have 30-minute intervals or 20-minute intervals. One person goes and one person leaves. It does not have to be a full shift of people go home at the same time, but we can stagger their shifts. And for some people, that works out very well for them as employees anyway, because they may have different needs in their own home as far as getting children to school and that sort of thing. So it gives us an opportunity.
Throughout your organization, Minnesota just recently, in the last few years, created an assisted living license. Prior to that, there wasn't a license. So in your organization, how many of your facilities are required to be licensed, or are they licensed? Or what percentage of your facilities are licensed by the state?
I probably 95% or better.
Yeah, so
are
it's an
licensed.
important-
The ones that are not licensed are certified. There is a difference in many states between a certified home and a licensed home.
Okay.
A lot of times that's the number of residents. Almost all of our homes in Kentucky are certified. That's what the state of Kentucky prefers. They only allow 3 people per home. It's a much smaller home, and it takes a lot of them
Yeah.
to serve that need.
So again, like I think you listening here tonight, the impact is really on parking, staff turnover, you know, the amount of driveway, the wetlands and all that we're talking about, and ultimately a smaller footprint and a smaller size could effectively help. And I just would say whatever happens here, your license is going to be critical. And remember, if you get a development or agreement tonight, 1 year from now, we review the CUP. So whatever happens going forward, you got to recognize your license, and your review of the CUP happens a year from now.
Right. We welcome that. These types of homes are all CARF certified. We do have places that are larger facilities out west that are JACO certified rather than CARF. But the CARF surveys take place every 3 years at all sorts of facilities like this for all providers. And so we're used to scrutiny.
Thank you.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
Thank you. I was wondering, what's the average length of a client living in your in this facility?
That's a very good question. It's changed over the years. I've been at this with this company for 15 and a half years. And the number until a few years ago was probably 9 months was the number that I had always been given. Some people here are there for a lesser period of time. They get the benefit of the programming quicker. And other people, some people may not be able to ever go back home because there's nobody at home to take care of them, to help them out. But the average was considered to be about 9 months per individual. And again, it depends on the program. The neuro rehab programs are a little bit different than some of the other programs, than the kids programs that we run. And so we would anticipate that probably a stay of 9 to 12 months is probably more the average of what we would see in a home like this.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Okay, is there any other staff person from Neuro Restorative who wanted to address some of the questions that the council has concerning parking or concerning snow removal, protection of the wetlands? Would
Yes,
anyone like to
I would
respond to that?
welcome Sharon Berlin to come. She could speak about the operations, and then we have an engineer with us as well that could speak about that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Good evening. Could you please state your name for the record?
My name is Sharon Berlin. My address is 1480 Mississippi River Boulevard. I'm in St. Paul. And I'm a registered nurse, and I have been affiliated with this company for 2 decades. I did most of my tenure in Michigan, but I've been in Minnesota for the last 5 years. And Neuro Restorative reached out to me and said, hey, you're in Minnesota, and we want to start up a program here, and would you be interested? So I've gone on that long journey of getting my licensed assisted living director credential, which is happening right now because that, as you know, since the assisted living laws changed, that's what's necessary to run a program like this. One of the things I did want to say before I forget is when when a home like this gets started, very likely we are not going to see 8 residents for quite some time. That can be years. It takes a while to build up our reputation in an area, to educate people on what our services are. This is kind of a niche program because, you know, we're not acute care, we're not hospital care, we're not nursing home care, okay? We're somewhere in between. Steve did a really great job explaining what our role is in the community. So it takes a while to attain that number, and as Steve explained, you know, 9 months is the average, 9 to 12 months would be the average stay for a person. So there's ebb and flow. You know, one of the reasons to create an 8-bed facility is so that we have that capacity at times when we have people coming and going, you know, so that we don't have somebody, say, who's ready to move on, but, you know, maybe they need a couple more months of the work we're doing with them in order to move to a more independent setting, and we have somebody calling us saying, hey, this person needs help right now. So, we have that extra sort of space to, create that room for another person to come into our program. So I wanted to address that. Does anybody have any specific program questions for me?
I have a question about the parking, that this doesn't necessarily envision family members coming to visit, or does it include any kind of special therapies and therapists that may be coming to the facility?
I believe there was, and let me look at the chart really quick. Madam Mayor, I thought they had supervisor, hospital visitor. 3. Oh, I didn't see the therapist on here, but visitor they certainly have on this chart, so that person has been accounted for. And I can tell you with the direct care staff numbers they have, there be staggered start times, as Steve suggested, and a lot of times, like, our people are usually very active in the community. They're out and about, so staff show up very early in the morning to get these people help started with their day. And then they're out and about. A lot of times they're out doing volunteer opportunities in the community. They're out shopping. They're out participating in any community activities that are available, which you have a really wonderful community here, I can tell just by reading your newsletters and listening to you folks tonight. So there would be a lot for them to participate in. And so, staff will be on outings with participants during the day. Sometimes the therapists will drop in for an hour or two during the day to do, some outpatient therapy. Visitors, again, they're not going to show up early in the morning, and they don't show up at the time staff shows up. So it'd be kind of a mid-morning-ish or an evening-ish visit, and usually not long visits. So people, when they're in active rehab like this, they don't always tolerate really long visits. Sometimes they just want a little touch base, and that's not typically a big part of the population of the house at any one time. Okay,
Councilmember Juniman, you had a question.
Thank you. What's the age range in this type of a facility?
It's broad. It's all adults. Okay,
all
so over
adults.
the age of 18. Mm-hmm. Okay. But when I worked in my program, and this was in Michigan, and it was a very similar type of setting. It was a very similar type of home, and we had people from the age of probably 20 at the no, we had a 19-year-old one time, car accident for the 19-year-old, and to the age of probably late 50s.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Councilmembers, any other questions? Okay, maybe your engineer can come up.
thank you for your time.
Thank you. You've heard some of our questions about
Hello.
snow. Are you from Minnesota?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
So my name is Joe Mauer. My address is 1000 East 146th Street, Burnsville, Minnesota, 55337. So I've been hired by them to basically put together a site plan from the house that they provided on there. And I've been working with city staff, the planning and engineering to accommodate what they want to look for providing the parking and minimize as much as we can with impact on the site. And as you guys have seen with that wetland and the criteria that goes along with it, it has certain restrictions with this lot. So through variations of doing the site plan, this is kind of the latest one that we have to kind of make sure that everything is going according to the city wants it. So,
Any questions for the, specific questions for the engineer? Councilmember Juniman.
Sorry. I'm not sure if it's for him or for staff or yes.
Okay, we'll find out.
Yes. When it comes to the parking, this parking, and Bill brought this up before about possibly going to partial pervious pavers or even green parking, if they can justify saying that the average is 7, but 10 will be necessary to satisfy being there. Have those things been approached? And Steve, do you think that's something we could approach with them?
Mr. Love.
Mayor and Council, so as far as the design plan has gone so far, this process is more about the use so far.
Right.
So we haven't actually got to that stage of looking at what treatments could be potentially used there. So depending on the soil type, a pervious driveway certainly could be a possibility. I know the land north of the driveway currently is essentially like a lawn, and that's where, we recognize that, we recognize the wetland in the southwest corner there, and the site itself, as you see it, doesn't trigger our stormwater quality requirements. But with it being a CUP, that's where we were able to weigh in and say we wanted additional water quality treatments to be installed to handle that increase in impervious area out there over what was previously there.
Okay, and you know me. I'm not saying all pervious pavers, but I'm saying if this is going to move forward, the parking thing needs to be worked with. And the less impervious, the better. But again, my concern is because of what our ordinance says and when the lot split said driveway. As a matter of fact, it's an existing driveway. And just because our parking requirement flipped into having to have more impervious surface doesn't necessarily mean that that solves the problem for me. Yes, it takes care of putting the cars somewhere, but there are impacts from that. And so that is a heck of a lot of impervious concrete, asphalt, whatever it's going to be. And it's only a solution to where to put a car. It's not a solution to how we handle a driveway and parking spaces that are located in a wetland buffer zone. And so the expectation from me, at least, is that if this is what you want to pursue, that means it's not going to be the average, okay, we'll have the blacktop contractor come in and blacktop all that area and then they'll be gone. Wrong. It means doing it basically in the most environmentally friendly way we can find. And so I'm looking at the absolute necessity of how much driveway and how much of that driveway / parking space could be pervious pavers, or better yet, for overflow parking, it could be green parking. We have to start moving that direction anyway, in my mind, but part of what's wrong with this proposal is not the house and it's not the function, it's this lot and this house and the function. And so it's kind of like you're proposing to us what I call a quasi-business building, even though it's a home, and therefore the associated parking issues and so on a residential lot. And so that's what's causing a lot of this. And again, I say when the lot split was made, it was never intended to go this direction. It was to be, regular houses. And I'm not, as she has said and the mayor said, this is a wonderful idea. It's just that this lot, of all the ones you had to end up with, it's like, really? It's like this and the wrong one came up. And I know you want to be in a nice area, but we have lots of nice areas. But I cannot wrap my head around all this impervious surface to satisfy the parking issue and then make other issues out of it. It's really difficult for me. So if we're going to move this forward at all, from my standpoint, it has to go back to the drawing board with Steve and Sean Finwall, our environmental planner, about how you take this much parking area, make it usable, but not inflict irreparable damage on the wetland buffer. And that brings up one more issue I have, and it's a big one, and that's grading for something this size on that lot.
That can be done.
Because remember, you cannot infringe on the buffer zone with grading either. And that means your pile of dirt in a rainstorm cannot run off on that buffer zone. Feel the buzzer. No. So I want you to know what a difficult lot you are dealing with. And I would be saying this to people who wanted to build a smaller house and have to have their driveway right there. We made that requirement for the driveway right there on purpose because it's the least, if you will, offensive. And it was a residential lot, so we were trying to do what we call a compromise. But it doesn't mean I'm going to compromise the environmental part of it, because I'm not. It just, we cannot. It's a managed A wetland. That's the highest level you can get. And we made it our business several years ago to start protecting those things here because lots of places don't. And when you see other places, even in Minnesota right now, central Minnesota in particular, with all the flooding, part of their problem is that for the last 35 years, everybody's filling in every pothole within sight. So there's nowhere for the water to go. Okay, we're protecting those things because we don't want that to happen, and we also like to protect the life that goes with it. The flowers, the animals, the whole thing. It's part of who we are. And so this has to be done perfectly to work. It just does. And I'm not going to, you know me, compromise is not a word when it comes to that. So I just want you to know where I'm coming from, and I want you to know what we need from staff, and you working with staff.
What I hear are an awful lot of questions coming from the council. I know we want to hear from the residents. Sure, just one second. I know that Councilor Villavicencio and then Knutson is next, but I wanted to throw something in here too, that this is a different driveway plan than was included in the split, which then causes my mind to think, shouldn't there be some type of a variance on the split or some other kind of technique? I mean, that has to be reviewed, and that isn't before us. And one of my concerns is that we have an awful lot of questions that aren't answered. We don't have a grading plan, and from my observation, we need a grading plan before I'm going to feel comfortable at all with this, and a parking plan. And I don't feel comfortable sitting up here at the DS when we have so many questions, basically making a decision when we have so many unanswered questions. So one of the things that I am going to suggest, and we're still going to hear from the residents too, is that, you know, and I've said this many times sitting up here, we really rely on our planning commission, on design review, on our commissions when it comes to this. And I did watch the planning commission meeting, and I had all of these questions that were starting back then just watching the planning commission meeting. So I'm ultimately of a mind at this point in time in our discussion that this needs to go back to the planning commission, and these issues need to get worked out and take a look at these in a deeper dive. And we need to have a grading plan. We need to have a deeper dive.
Alternatives to the parking.
Alternatives, and look at this, the parking issue and the wetlands, because this just absolutely needs protection. I think Councilmember Knutson was next, or was it Villavicencio? Do you remember?
First.
Was it? Okay, thank you.
I'll try to keep this quick. My question was along the parking as well, around have there been any consideration, the fact that if these folks are as busy as you say they're going to be, consideration for the medical transportation that'll be coming in here, the paratransit that'll be coming in to the driveway, which is multiple buildings, multiple vehicles per day, multiple times per day. And then also, too, just in case I don't have an opportunity to say this, I just feel very strongly that maybe Maplewood should not go in the way of doing an 8-person place like this. It kind of goes against my principles as a disability justice person, that these are more like mini institutions. And, and we can debate those issues, but, that's where I sit on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Knutson.
Yeah, a very practical question here. Given that we know all these problems, I read in here and I heard today that there's a stormwater mitigation plan and perhaps another plan. So given all that, the staff has reviewed this, come up with a plan, and are comfortable recommending it. Can you tell me more about what mitigation is already planned right now?
So, Mayor and Council, as I mentioned, there hasn't been a grading plan in this stage because it's a conditional use permit. We typically see those grading plans as they come in for the building operation. The project itself, as it sits today, what you see on your screen there, would not trigger our water quality requirements. So a lot of times we wouldn't have a water quality plan per se, but with it being, as I understand it, a conditional use permit, we're able to add on. And so that's why we did recommend have water quality, a water quality feature installed to capture the runoff from the driveway and impervious area. And generally when we do that, we also require a stormwater maintenance agreement. So that ensures long-term maintenance of that.
There was a rain garden mentioned, is that?
That's part of it.
That's one of the options.
One of the options?
Yep.
Okay. Now, in your view, that solves, I know there was one email coming to, at times of the year, the water overruns someone else's property. So you're suggesting that this stormwater mitigation, whether it be a rain garden or other kind of mechanism, would solve for the most part?
It would account for the additional increase in impervious area over what was there with the original home.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Juniman.
Yeah. I think it'll be Steve's responsibility of one person if we send this back to the drawing board. But in reading my whole presentation of this in my packet, and I went back to the lot split, you can tell with our ordinances in place, and I have actually not read a report quite this specific until now, which tells you we have not had anyone who wants to put something quite this large on a lot that has a wetland involved. That's what has triggered this. Mm-hmm. And so our environmental planner, her report was 2 pages long, and, you know, if you read between the lines, she's saying be very careful. And how many times did she say, if the driveway is extended, there must be a variance. So they have to apply for a variance to the wetland buffer besides wanting a CUP, because otherwise we can't let them do anything with a driveway. It's all on the buffer zone. And I am not going to sit up here and say we're going to violate our own ordinance. Ain't happening. I don't care. Someone really important that supposedly is from on high comes and says that to me. No. We have to have that part processed, so that means it goes through Public Works partially and Environmental Department again to say, okay, what kind of a variance are you saying is ideal? And then they could give us, I suppose, what kind of parking options would help fulfill it. And it, like I said, it's just not, I don't want to set up for failure on anyone's part. And when Steve said, and it was in the report, that there'll have to be an agreement, one of those agreements, my hair almost stood up on end because I've been here enough times. I need to find out who in their organization will be responsible then for that, because obviously the company doesn't live at this address. Mm-hmm. And anytime you have this wetland maintenance thing, or this stormwater maintenance agreement thing, there's this little thing in the back of my head that comes on with the times I've sat here and we have to process it because whoever said they were responsible hasn't been particularly responsible. And the city has had to clean it out and the blah, 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 blah. This is all I'm saying. I don't want it to go that way. If we're going to do this for these people, we're going to do it right, or we're not going to do it at all. Because it cannot impact that wetland. No. Nor can it impact the amount of water that runs on everybody else's property, which is already touch and go down there. So I think we just need more, and probably more than the average, engineering work on this to give us what we're looking for so we can try and balance it out, giving everybody's side, if you will, equal time, meaning their proposal and the neighbors' concerns. But I won't I won't participate in violating our wetland setback ordinance.
I think what I'd like to do is hear from the residents, if that's okay. We'll make sure everybody gets an opportunity. Is there anyone, would you like to come up to the DS, please? We'll take turns. Everyone, will have an opportunity if you want to say something.
Yes.
Would you please state your name and your address?
Yes. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this evening. My name is Louis Mariucci. I live at 2222 Dahl Avenue East on the St. Paul side, so I especially thank you for letting me speak here. And I live approximately 2.5 blocks from the proposed site, and I moved here in that area particularly 26 years ago because I felt that it was the closest of being outside of the city and yet being in the city without having businesses, buildings, this and that around me. Because originally I'm from northern Minnesota and we kind of like our wilderness. So anyways, my big concern is we can look at this here and you can solve all the technical issues, you can all that, but I feel the bigger question and the bigger issue is being missed here. This was zoned as a residential area. People moved in because it was a residential area. Now, as well-intentioned and as good as what they're building, which I say is fantastic, but it is a business. They make a profit. They're not in business for charity work. It's a business. So what you're doing is you're saying that you want to put a business in a residential area, and you look at a lot of the issues and everything it is, when I know of people that wanted to buy the lot, and because of the issues, they couldn't buy it and build. So really, to me, that is the ultimate issue. Do we keep on taking residential areas, we change our zoning laws for individual entities so that and make reasons why we do that? Or do we keep true to areas that this is a residential area? This was zoned for family dwellings. That's where we'd like to keep it. And the other thing I would pose with that, if this was a 10-bedroom B&B, would we even be having this conversation? Thank you for listening to me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to come? Oh, excuse me, would you please go and see the city clerk and give your name and address, please? Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the council.
Hello, my name's Brenda Anderson, and I live at 2217 Dahl Avenue, across the street from Louis. But I had a son that lived on the corner, which would be facing where they want to build. And I had a son who tried to buy. He was in the process of buying a lot because he wanted to live close to my husband and I and his brother. So he was in the process of buying. This was when it was split into 2 lots. And they got the blueprint and all of their financing and everything together. Then a bunch of problems start coming in. With the wetlands, you can't get 2 houses in here because of the wetlands. And then they were talking to him about a variance with one of the neighbors or something like that. He's not here to talk because my son was hit on McKnight, and he has a traumatic brain injury, and this just happened last September, so I know. And I go along with what you're trying to do, but it's just, that's not the place. We have bus stops right there almost in front of where they want to build at, where we have kids getting off the bus, waiting for the bus. I think you could probably, as a chief, say how dangerous it is on McKnight. Not only did my son get hit on McKnight and has a traumatic brain injury, my husband and myself got hit. My husband had to be cut out of the car. I had surgery. McKnight is a dangerous street. I have 2 girlfriends that both lost a daughter each on McKnight, and I can't see any kind of parking on McKnight. It's dangerous enough. There's enough cars that go up down McKnight thinking they're on the highway. And we've lived there for 25 years. And I go along with what they want to build, but I don't think that that's the place for it to be. You're going to really mess up a lot of the wetlands in there, the animals and that we have that come through all over there. I just don't think that it's right. And I do know, reading and some of the material and then what was here, at first they said 10 beds. Then it went to 6 beds. Now you're talking about 8 beds. What is it going to be? And all of the traffic that's going to be coming in there with deliveries. And I understand, and I can't tell you where they're at, but I understand that within a 5-mile radius of where we live at, there are 3 places like that, like what they want to build, but not for traumatic brain injuries, for other, people that have problems or whatever. And I go, why do you have to put a 4th one in if there's 3 within 5 miles each way of us, less than 5 miles from where our area is? Now we have to have another one? I just don't, I don't, we have some new homes that are in there. What is these people's home values going to drop to that, I don't want to, they put their house up for sale, I don't want to buy because that it's a faculty, it's not a home. There's no way for these people to get any outdoors activity. You can't walk down. McKnight is one of the most dangerous streets to walk on. What are you going to push people in wheelchairs down McKnight to go to the park, which the closest park really is Battle Creek? I don't know. I just hope that when you make this decision, that you all know how us people that live around there, and we, although we're on the St. Paul side, I have a brother that lives on Maplewood on Dahl. His wife and probably would be here, but they have COVID, so they can't be here. But there's so many people around there, and our neighborhood is wonderful. And on National Night Out and everything, people from Maplewood come over to our side. We all get together in that. This just isn't really the place for this faculty to be. And I hope when you make a decision that you think about all of us people and everybody. I think we have close to 100 names on our petition of people that live on both sides of how we feel about that being there. So
thank you.
Thank you.
Would you please go and sign? Next. Good evening. Please state your name and your address.
Thank you, Council, and thank you, Mayor. My name is John Erickson, 2206 Matterhorn Lane, St. Paul side. We read verbatim to the local residents 3 points: environmental impact, parking, and the longevity. Let me read the longevity. If this company moves out or closes due to economic, staffing, or legal problems, it will be a vacant 8-room medical facility. Due to its distinctly medically oriented design, it is very unlikely it will ever return back to a residential single-family home. There will be pressure to occupy the facility once again with another group home or clinic. And I'm really concerned with the wetlands. Once you lose a wetland, you don't get it back. And I'd hate to look down the street and see a big green pond, because then what are we going to do? Some of our neighbors have already been flooding because of other construction, and I just see more of that coming. I don't like the parking plan. I agree with what they're doing. I think they should find one that has less grading. On the image, it really doesn't show how tall that hill is back there, but they're not allowed to dig into that hill. There's nowhere for the water to go except other people's backyards or onto McKnight Road. And in my opinion, I think it's on a razor's edge. Everything has to line up perfect, or you got big problems. And it's like trying to cram it. There's like 10 things that have to happen perfectly for this to work, and I see very few things working for this. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Douglas, middle initial J, last name Laska, Laska. I live at 2314 Linwood Avenue, so I'm in the Maplewood side of the story. I only have one comment. I understand what they're doing, and I think it's a fantastic goal. I also have a grandchild who has spinal muscular atrophy, and he's been in a wheelchair since he was 2 years old, and Ben will turn 17 or 18 in January. This is a medical facility. It is not a commercial, it is not a residential facility. And there's going to be a lot of people. I know my grandson had physical therapists come, occupational therapists, teachers. They had teaching schedules that they had to follow. They have a school bus that gets in there. So I'm not sure what the age bracket is, but if there's any ages under the 21, they're going to be going to high school, grade school, college, whatever. So that's really all I have to say. I think we live in a residential district, and Maplewood had plenty of places that could be purchased. Carver's General Repair is in Maplewood, and that went to an outside landscaping company. Would have been a great facility. A lot of area, a lot of land. That's all. Thank you for your
very
time.
much. Any other residents who would like to address the council? Good evening and welcome.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council and city staff. Thank you. First of all, my name is Joanne Wade. I live at 2315 Timber Trail East in Maplewood. Madam Mayor, I want to thank you for coming to the neighborhood last week and looking around. And I also want to thank all the council members because I communicated with you many times, I feel, and I appreciate your feedback and your time and your diligence. I also very much appreciate the comments that we're hearing here tonight because it's showing all of us that you're really seriously considering and thinking about all the things that we have all been thinking about. So anyway, I really don't have anything additional to say. I'm not going to beat a dead horse. But I do have the original petitions that I would like to present, and maybe I could hand them to the clerk.
Yes, that would be good.
But there are a few more, actually, there's probably a dozen or 20 more, I don't know. I just got back from 5 days away. But there are more signatures than what I sent you last week. So anyway, I just want to thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. One more?
Hi, my name is Eric Anderson. That was my wife, Brenda. I live at 2217 Dahl in St. Paul. I just wanted to talk about parking a little bit. I was a St. Paul police officer for 36 years, and for probably 5 years of that, I was in charge of parking enforcement in St. Paul. People are going to park on McKnight. People are going to park on Matterhorn because it's right across the street from the facility. They're going to do it, and they're going to do it just for a minute, or there's a truck coming, so you need to move your cars out so we can get the bigger truck in. But it's going to happen, and that'll create some problems. It'll make people walk outside the fog line, outside the shoulder. Somebody could get hit. Like I said, my wife had two friends who had children killed on McKnight. My wife and I were hit at London Lane and McKnight. My son with a traumatic brain injury was hit at London Lane and McKnight. And my son, who was a St. Paul police officer, called me this evening, and I think the officers that weren't here for the swearing in had to bail to go to an accident with serious injuries at London Lane and McKnight. So it is a dangerous street. It's like 40-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's a county road. People drive 50, 55. But the parking, no matter what the plan is, they will park on the street because it's easy. They will park across the street on Matterhorn because then they won't have to come in. And the residents on Matterhorn on the St. Paul side will have to wind up getting residential parking permits, which is incurring a cost so that you can't park on that street unless you have a permit. And it's going to, you know, I don't know about the bus route. You said you were interested in public transportation for employees. I've lived there for 25 years. I've seen the signs. I have never seen a bus on McKnight. I don't know how often they run. I don't know how far down they run. I don't know how often they run. But if I was looking to take a bus into St. Paul, I wouldn't consider that reliable transportation. So parking is a concern, pedestrian safety is a concern, and, you know, just people being people, they're going to park there. So
Thank you. Next. Good evening.
Thank you. My name is Josh Evans, live on 2248 Matterhorn Lane on the St. Paul side, unfortunately. But I grew up in South Maplewood.
And you didn't stay?
I couldn't find a house when I moved back, sorry. I have 3 children. We're straight across the street from this property, and I do not want to deal with cars parking in front of my house. Kids run back and forth to the other neighbors. Something has changed. You want to come back up for a second and explain the water levels in your backyard? No. Would you mind, quick, from that property just to the south? Something has changed back there, you know what I mean?
Well, you all received pictures of my backyard and my fence. And the change happened when the property at 832 McKnight was granted a variance, and it was a pretty generous variance when that house was built. The builder no longer lives there. He sold that home to other residents. But the first spring that home and driveway with the 3-car garage was in place, I suddenly had the pond that borders on 5 of our properties on Timber Trail East. The pond came up through my fence into my yard. Now, I will say this, at the risk of going over time, but to be honest, we learned, and the people who built the house that we live in learned after the house had been built for many years that our home actually part of it does sit in the wetland. But it wasn't wetland when the home was built, okay? So the property was grandfathered in. But our neighbor to the back, 832 McKnight, they have very restricted use of what's not their home and their driveway, right? And so they plant nothing, they mow, they have a very small lawn, they mow. And unfortunately, they couldn't be here tonight, but a major part of my personal concern is with this additional loss of land that can soak up water, I don't know how much more pond I'm going to have through my fence. So that's...
Yes.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's definitely burning up the wetlands in that area.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to say? Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council? Okay, council members, are there any other questions, or should we, there's one more question, and then I think we need to go to discussion. Councilmember Knudsen.
Well, I'm listening to the whole discussion, and from the neighbor's point of view, I can see, there's concern about the wetlands and so forth. Is it ever buildable, or is it only buildable if it's an acceptable build? I mean, is the neighbors basically saying no one can build on this?
I don't hear that. I don't hear that.
So it's this.
Talk to the owner of the land.
You know what? Tell you what, I don't want to have
The owner said he would build on it.
Yeah, I don't get that impression that this is not a buildable lot. That's not what this is about.
I just want to clarify that.
Right.
So.
I don't see that is an issue, nor is that something that is really even appropriate for us to even.
No, it's not.
No.
I agree.
This is about this particular lot and the fact that this lot is such a unique lot with the wetlands there. And trying to I can envision that something would work there. You know, if you look at the old driveway that is in the previous plan, that goes up to a single-family home. So I think that's what the issue is, really.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Juniman.
Yeah, to address that, when you go back to the notes from the 2017 lot split, that's where it's very obvious that it's doable, but even at that, it was said with our new wetland setback issues, which weren't there, that's why some of these people could have houses there, but, things change. And so once those went into effect, that's why the lot split was so specific that driveway had to stay right where it was, and it was doable. But, that's doable and makes sense are not always the same thing. But yes, they are buildable for people who want to deal with the issue and are building a smaller footprint. So yes, but that has almost, we wouldn't be bickering about this at all if that lot had been deemed by anyone, engineer or otherwise, unbuildable, and it has not, so it is a buildable lot. I have to correct one thought that was expressed here, because I've sat here a long time, and this is not the first time I've dealt with any kind of a group setting home going into a neighborhood. And I know why they want to build in this neighborhood. It's a nice neighborhood, and they want the people to feel like they're in a home and not a facility where they're locked up. It's a totally different bag. That's why they want to build in somewhere like this. I get that. I just happen to think this lot's a little small for this. And I have to say, for people who say we have enough of these homes, that's like saying I don't want those people in my neighborhood. It's just not, no. And, if you want to have a contest, I win, because we have 4 of them within 3 blocks of my house. So, I win that contest. But, and as long as they're run so the people there are happy, I'm happy. It's fine by me. But I'm just worried, like they are, about the whole thing that the size of this means for parking issues. And as I've said, I will not do anything that interferes with our wetland buffer zone. I just won't, because it affects everybody else's water and ours. Thank you, Mayor.
So, kind of wrapping this up, my thought is to send this back through our process, that we need additional information, we need a deeper dive on this. We need a dive looking specifically at the parking, and I would like a review of whether or not there needs to be a variance and how that fits in, because I think the only 2 council members that were on the council at the time when we did the lot division were Councilmember Juniman and myself, and I remember having this discussion. And it's very specific in here. I read that. It's number 2, I think, somewhere in here, that this driveway that's being proposed is not the driveway that's there now. And so in order to change that, there needs to be a variance. I want to make sure that we are doing this correctly and taking all of that into consideration. I continue to be very concerned about the grading, and we need to have additional information. We really rely on our processes, and the Planning Commission, I think, is the commission where this needs to go back for further work. We need additional information from our environmental planner. We need additional information and review about that former split and what that looked like. So, Mr. Beatty, if I were to make that motion, what would we, because we have a motion that's been proposed, but I'm proposing sending this back for additional work, because quite frankly, council members, I don't feel comfortable making a decision like this on the fly when there's so much that we just don't know. And we need additional information. So, Mr. Beatty?
Madam Mayor, Council, I think that's a perfectly appropriate motion. The only thing I would inquire about is where we are with the 60-day rule.
Mr. Thompson.
Mayor and council, just for the audience and for the applicant, we have under the statute up to 120 days to make a decision. We are within the first 60 days, so we will need to send an extension letter, which we have the ability to do, to extend it for an additional 60 days. Just on the timing, what we expect, we'll work with the applicant on the additional information that you've requested. We will likely bring this then to the September 20th Planning Commission meeting, and then that will come back to you at your October 10th City Council. That's tentative, but that's probably the realistic time frame here moving forward on when we expect this to come back to you.
Okay.
Mayor?
Councilmember Juniman.
And just so people know, we don't like putting things off. It's not like, oh, goody, we have another 60 days. That's not what this is about. This is about exactly what the mayor asked for, more information so we have a better way to make a decision. And I've never known this group to wait until the end of that 60 days. As soon as we have the right amount of information, it'll come back to us. But I'm with you. I'm very uncomfortable, so second your motion.
Okay. City Clerk Cynthia, did you understand the motion? Okay, Mr. Beatty, how should we frame up the motion?
Did you get lost?
Madam Mayor and Council, I think the intent is to make a motion to refer this matter back to the Planning Commission for additional consideration of the items that you've mentioned, and then bring it back, as Mr. Thompson says, at an appropriate time.
Thank you.
But it's also appropriate staff, not just the Planning Commission.
Right, I think we need to, I think we've made it clear, we need information from environmental planning, we need information from Mr. Love. So there's a lot, in my estimation, there's a lot more work that needs to be done before we're going to be prepared to consider this. So.
And I seconded it.
Did you get it there? We will get it. It's what Mr. Beatty said. Okay, thank you. It's been moved and by Abrams and seconded by Juniman. The motion to return this issue back to staff and the Planning Commission for follow-up and a deeper dive on the things that we have identified up here at the council, to be brought back to us in the timeline that Mr. Thompson has identified. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for your input, and we'll see you again. Thank you. We have one more item on our agenda tonight, the resolution authorizing the sales of cannabis products, and there are two actual motions for that. So, Mr. Beatty, I believe this is yours.
Yes, Madam Mayor, Council, we had, I think, a pretty thorough discussion last time about the options that were available to the City Council to deal with the legislation that became effective July 1st. And so your direction was to bring back an interim ordinance which creates a moratorium halting any new businesses from selling the product, recognizing that there are probably some who are already doing so and not attempting to do anything about that. And we talked about that quite a bit, and I think ultimately, my sense was that you understood what that ordinance could accomplish and what it probably couldn't accomplish. Some of you used the term a statement, that it was, you were viewing this as a statement on the council's part, and I think that's probably a good way to consider it. So included in your packet is an interim ordinance that does exactly that. And if you approve that, the follow-up item is to authorize, there's a resolution to authorize publication of that ordinance by title and summary.
Thank you, Mr. Beatty. Council members, are there any questions for Mr. Beatty? Councilmember Juniman.
Actually, it's for my colleagues. Do you understand, as I do, that part of the reason we're doing this is to get a handle around how we would license it and enforce it if it got to that point? Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. And of course, my profound thanks to the legislature for not thinking about that part.
Kind of caught everyone flat-footed.
That was intentional.
Any other questions?
My button's not working.
Oh,
Sorry about that.
Councilmember Villavicencio.
My quick question was, I know we discussed, and I know it says in there about for folks or businesses that have already started to sell, is there any, how are we going to tell the businesses that have already started to not? We're just not going to know, right?
No.
Mr. Beatty, do you want to respond to that?
Well, Madam Mayor, Council, that is precisely one of the issues that's of concern, and we discussed that, and in my opinion, there's no practical way of doing so, which is why, again, I thought that the statement last time that this was intended as a statement from the city was probably the most accurate reflection of the state of affairs. And, you know, and as Councilmember Ginneman pointed out, the other thing that an interim ordinance does is directs a study to be conducted. And we talked a little bit about that, and we can go quickly or not so quickly on that. I think the hope is that the legislature revisits this next year and brings some sense, because there was, again, an article in the Star Tribune today, which probably some of you saw, about the confusion that this has stirred. Cities all over the metropolitan area are, and probably the state, are dealing with the very thing that we are, and I think most of them are hoping that there's some higher power that brings some sense to this. And so there will be a study that's undertaken, and at some point, hopefully, if the state does not step in and preempt the field, we will probably be coming back at some point with most likely a licensing scheme.
Thank you. Any other questions, council members, or comments? Okay, would someone like to make the first motion?
I move to adopt an interim ordinance authorizing studies and imposing a moratorium on the initiation of sales of cannabis products.
Second.
Moved by Juniman, seconded by Knutson, the motion to adopt an interim ordinance authorizing studies and imposing a moratorium on the initiation of sales of cannabis products. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
4 in favor and 1 opposed. The second motion to adopt the resolution authorizing publication of the ordinance by title and summary.
Second. Moving it?
Yes, moved it. I'll move it. By Abrams, seconded by Juniman, the motion to adopt the resolution authorizing publication of the ordinance by title and summary. Any further discussion?
Well, we could suggest that the staff send a copy to our legislative delegation. Here's your homework.
Thank you for that discussion. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Is that unanimous? Okay, so the motion to publish it is unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. We have no award of bids. And council members, thank you for all your work tonight and your good discussion. And with that, we are adjourned.
Mr. Darrow.